Okay, I want you to just imagine this for a second. The most powerful person in the world, the President of the United States, is about to do something completely unthinkable. We're talking August 1974, and Richard Nixon is facing a crisis that would literally change American politics forever. And there it is. With those words, it was all over. Richard Nixon became the first and still the only U.S. president to ever resign from office. I mean, what a stunning end to a political drama that had the entire nation glued to their seats. But that's the real mystery here, isn't it? How did a seemingly small, almost comical crime, something the White House itself brushed off as a third-rate burglary, how did that manage to unravel an entire presidency? Well, let's break down exactly how it all happened. So we're actually starting this story at the very end, with the resignation. But what could possibly bring the most powerful man on the planet to this point? To really get it, we have to rewind. We have to go back to where the whole story truly began.
And it didn't start in a hotel. No, it started with paranoia. A deep, gripping paranoia inside a White House that was obsessed with secrets and control. This, right here, is where the real seeds of the scandal were planted. So back in 1971, the New York Times dropped an absolute bombshell. They published thousands of pages of top-secret documents that showed multiple U.S. governments had been lying to the American people for years about the Vietnam War. Now, for President Nixon, this wasn't just some embarrassing headline. It felt like a direct attack on his secret plan to end the war. And this leak, it just fed this growing fear that enemies were everywhere trying to bring him down.
Nixon was absolutely furious. And his response was to create this secret team. Their official job was to stop any more information from getting out, which is how they got their nickname, the Plumbers. But let's be real, their unofficial mission, born out of that paranoia, was to play dirty, to dig up dirt on political enemies, and to operate completely outside the law. And this brings us right to the event that gave the whole scandal its famous name. The Plumbers were about to pivot from just plugging leaks to creating a full-blown political disaster for Nixon's opponents. With the 1972 presidential election heating up, the Plumbers got a brand new assignment: good old-fashioned political espionage. The goal was pretty straightforward: break into the Democratic Party's main office, which happened to be in the Watergate complex, and plant listening devices to spy on their campaign strategy. Now, this is where the whole thing gets kind of ridiculous, because it went so badly. On the night of June 17, 1972, the whole operation was just a comedy of errors. The burglars taped a door latch so it wouldn't lock. A security guard doing his rounds finds the tape, thinks nothing of it, and just pulls it off. But the burglars, they go back and put another piece of tape on the exact same door, so when the guard comes back around and sees it again, he knows something is definitely not right, and he calls the police. And just like that, 5 men are arrested red-handed right inside the DNC headquarters. They've got bugging equipment in their pockets. A tiny mistake, a little piece of tape, had just lit the fuse on what would become the biggest political scandal in American history. So the White House immediately tries to downplay it, say it was nothing. But 2 young reporters at the Washington Post, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, they had a hunch there was way more to the story. They started digging, and they were guided by one simple idea: follow the money.
Okay, so you really have to see the difference between the official story and what these reporters were finding. The White House is saying it's just a simple burglary, but Woodward and Bernstein find out one of the burglars is an ex-CIA agent. The White House says we have no connection, but a phone number for a White House aide is found in one of the burglars' notebooks. And here's the kicker: a $25,000 check meant for Nixon's re-election campaign was deposited right into one of the burglars' bank accounts. The pieces just weren't adding up.
Now, their investigation was getting help from a very powerful, very secret source inside the FBI, a source they codenamed Deep Throat. For decades, nobody knew who he was. It was one of the biggest mysteries in Washington. But we now know it was Mark Felt, the number 2 guy at the FBI. He was the one confirming their leads, keeping them on the right path, and pushing them to uncover a conspiracy that went all the way to the top. So, despite all this incredible reporting, Nixon wins re-election in a massive landslide. It really looked like the cover-up was working. But then, during these televised Senate hearings on the scandal, the whole investigation took a turn that, well, absolutely nobody saw coming. During these hearings, a White House aide named Alexander Butterfield gets asked a pretty routine question about how records were kept. And his answer was an absolute bombshell. He just casually reveals there is a taping system in the White House. And just like that, the entire world finds out that President Nixon has a secret, voice-activated system that recorded every single conversation he had in the Oval Office.
All of a sudden, there was physical proof. And what happened next was a year-long constitutional showdown. Nixon refused to hand over the tapes. He claimed executive privilege. He even fired the special prosecutor who was demanding them. But the fight went all the way to the Supreme Court, and they ruled unanimously he had to surrender the tapes. The game was up.
And isn't this the ultimate irony? The very tapes that Nixon created to preserve his legacy became the one thing that would completely destroy it. They were the smoking gun, capturing Nixon in his own voice, planning the criminal cover-up, just days after the break-in. There was no more denying it. So, with impeachment and removal from office looking like a sure thing, Nixon resigned. But you know what? The story doesn't really end there. The impact of Watergate would echo for decades and decades. The most direct legacy is this number right here. 1. Richard Nixon is still the first, and to this day, the only president of the United States to ever resign from office. But the impact of Watergate, man, it goes so much deeper. It created this huge wave of cynicism and mistrust in government that you can still feel today. But it also became this shining example of a free press holding power accountable. And of course, it gave us a whole new piece of political vocabulary. Now, anytime there's a big scandal anywhere in the world, what do we call it? We just slap "gate" on the end of the name. In the end, Watergate really leaves us with this big, fundamental question. It proved that in a democracy, no one is above the law, not even the president. The whole scandal is this powerful reminder that the fight for accountability, no matter how messy it gets, is sometimes way more important than the power it's trying to control.